Had a call this morning from one of my good friends, Ben, over at the Semper Gumby channel. I'll have it linked down below. He told me about the cell phone outage, that there were a lot of people that were just out of service. Most of this is happening in the South and the Southeast, but it's 54% of AT&T's customers are having disruptions. 1/3 have no signal whatsoever. My phone right now is reading SOS. Could AT&T get this back up? I hope they do. But it does affect a large amount of people, whether it's business or personal or an emergency. 8% are not even having mobile web service on their phone. So we are so dependent on our phones. I mean, they are convenient, they're great. I mean, this is a really nice computer that we have right in our hand. But what happens when that goes down? You know, we're seeing it right now in real time. And if they get it back, great. If they don't, then what are we going to do? Again, so dependent on our phones. For news, for entertainment, but even more importantly for 911 calls, which is a problem. In fact, there were a number of counties that told their citizens, they said, don't use the 911 service. Instead, use a text, and you text in your problem, whatever it is, which is much slower. And then what if text is down? So how are you going to take care of the different issues that can arise when you need a phone? You know, guys, pay phones used to be on every corner. We all had landlines in our home. I mean, the phone service, you know, was across the country. Yes, we had outages at times if the poles were knocked down or something happened. But there were ways to get to phones if you need to make a call. It was very inconvenient compared to what we do today. But let's look back at some things and see what is a great way to be prepared for no communications. First off is obviously having a landline at your home. My parents are terrible about not having their phones around. And we installed a landline just because it would ring and they would know where the phone is. It was right there in one place. And that's through cable, which is digital. But let's say you don't have internet, what do you do? But landlines are definitely something that make a good backup in case your cell service is out. But then to get the news, having a good radio. A lot of times we've kind of gone away from radio. We have Bluetooth, we have, you know, Amazon Music or whatever kind of music service we have. And so having a radio and having to listen to commercials is inconvenient. So a lot of times, you know, we have ways to circumvent, and we may not even have a radio. First off, I highly recommend having an emergency radio. I have a number of those that are actually solar, hand cranked, rechargeable batteries, and that way I can get information. It has the weather station where I can get any kind of emergency weather. It also has shortwave, which is, you know, a little bit different and outside of the norm, but it's something that you can utilize in case of an emergency. If you don't have cell service and you don't have internet, you're not even going to know what's going on. And really, that is one of the biggest fears. It strikes fear in people when they have no idea what's happening around them. Now, there are even more methods where we're getting down to ham radio, which is a great source with repeaters and being able to contact people. Even walkie-talkies or two-way family radios gives you some way of communication back and forth, but it is very limited. And CB, same thing. It's a great way to communicate, but again, it's very limited. Ham is probably one of the best options. And also satellite telephones. It's a great way to be able to hook up to the satellite link to be able to get to different people, especially if you're in an area where there is no cell service. But guys, comms are very important. Communication is vital. And knowing what's going on and being aware so you can make the right decision. So really one of the first things that I would recommend is having alternate communication systems. Now let's say you're traveling or you're just on the road and you have maps pulled up. You know, Google Maps are great, or Waze, and that's what I really like to use. But that way I know exactly what's going on. I have all the communication and everything. I don't even pay attention half the time to where I'm going because it's just what it says is what I'm doing. And it's kind of dangerous, honestly. It's good to know if you didn't have cell service, which I've had that before, where I've actually not had cell service and been in an area where I didn't know where I was going and didn't have internet. And so having a map, a standard physical map, you can get them at truck stops, you can get them at gas stations a lot of times. They're less frequent to find than they used to be. But having a good map, knowing where you are, and figuring it out. And guys, we have maps in all of our cars. I have them in my go bags, get home bag, bug out bag. And those maps, fairly reasonable. You can even order them online and you can have maps. And I've talked about having maps. It's a very important thing. Right now, it's extremely important. Now, I still have Wi-Fi, and so I can get online and look around, but let's say I don't. And with a disruption with the cell service, Wi-Fi could be one thing that we could also have a disruption with. And so making sure that you have maps put aside. Now, 911, that's a big one. And with our cell service, if something were to happen, you may have a medical emergency where you need help. And how do you get that help? How do you get an ambulance out to your house if you don't have cell service? And again, going back to communications, at least having a landline, you might be able to get in touch with someone. So with medical, making sure that you have a trauma kit. Trauma is typically the reason why we're calling 911 in a medical situation. CPR training, having training, going to classes, learning. Guys, you are responsible for your own medical safety. And when it comes to things that could be life-threatening, you need to have at least a way to be able to prolong their life in case something traumatic happens. But having medical supplies, knowing how to use them, get the training, that's vital for everyday life. But in a grid-down situation, which this is a somewhat of a grid-down situation, is having your medical taken care of. I get my medical supplies from Medical Outfitters, which is Skinny Medic's channel, but also USN ER Doc is amp3.net, and that's a great resource. David is a medical doctor, and he has put together some really cool kits. In fact, with both of those, you get a 10% discount using Sootch 00, which makes it really nice. Then if you have an emergency where you need the police, what do you do? Well, first off, making sure that you have your self-defense protocols in line. Making sure that you have a firearm, making sure that that it's loaded, that you know how to use it. You are responsible for your self-defense. And if there's ever a problem, a break-in, a home invasion, whatever it is making sure that you have a way to protect you and your family and your possessions, what you've worked very hard for. And then there's fire. What if you have a fire when you don't have cell service? What do you do? So first thing is to make sure you have things there, fire extinguishers. One thing that we just bought were these big mats, and when you have a kitchen fire, you take the big mat, it's a fireproof mat, and you throw it on the fire, and it smothers it, and it takes away the oxygen. But having different ways to be able to, not only just to save your home, but also to save your family's lives and to be able to get out, making sure your smoke detectors are either hooked up to the system or they're battery operated, or you have some sort of smoke detection, especially fire extinguishers, making sure that they are up to date, that they're within code, and they're not old. One thing about fire is to have a plan with your family. If you have a fire, have a designated point where you're going to meet, because sometimes you may or may not be able to get to everyone in the house, and they still may be able to get out, but you don't know that they're out, and that puts you in danger. A few years ago, there was a man who, he and his family, house caught on fire. They got outside. Their 2-year-old little girl, they couldn't find her. The man went back in, and the house collapsed on him, and he killed him. Unknowing to them, their daughter was in the backyard. She had gotten out of the house, so if they'd have known that, everything would have turned out really well. Also, if you have a second story, making sure you have a ladder that you can drop down to get out and escape if you can't go through the normal ways of your home. So guys, while this hopefully will pass, be able to have communications without any problem, which is beautiful, it's a wonderful, convenient thing, you need to be prepared to be able to handle things when technology fails. And with hacking and terrorism and cyber attacks and all the different things that can happen, guys, you really need to have backups. Be strong, be of good courage. God bless America. Long live the Republic. Now, one beautiful thing about the phones being out is that you'll actually be able to talk to your teenagers. I actually had a message from a good friend of mine. In fact, it's Semper Gumby. In fact, mine right now is saying SOS. So what do we do? A lot of problems, a lot of things. God bless America. Long live the Republic. And guys, honestly, without cell service, take a break and enjoy it.